Alright, so today I want to show you the variability of the Freeway ball python, how extremely variable the Freeways can be from one Freeway to another. It's pretty amazing. They're almost like snowflakes, almost like no two Freeways are the same. The Freeway consists of two genes, the yellow belly and the asphalt. And what I'm thinking is there's actually different lines of yellow belly and different lines of asphalt. We tend to group them all together. You know, most people say this is just a yellow belly. They don't really specify different lines of yellow belly, even though it can be pretty variable. When you actually mix it into the Freeway, you get some pretty interesting variabilities as far as the visual effect. And when it comes to Freeways, I'd say it's probably one of the most visually stunning combinations in all of ball pythons. Especially when you work other genes into the Freeway, you can make some really mind-blowing combinations. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the variability of the Freeway ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is either an asphalt or a yellow belly, which is where the project gets a little bit confusing. So if you actually take a Freeway, it's an allelic combination. So if you breed a Freeway to something else, half the offspring come out as asphalt, half come out as yellow belly, and you really can't tell the difference between the asphalt and the yellow belly, and they look almost like a normal ball python, which is kind of I'd say this is probably the one thing that got me out of getting into it right from the beginning. When I was trying to figure out what hets were and go down and all that, I was like, there's no way I want to get into this project. I want to get into something where I could take a pinstripe and breed it to something else and make half pinstripes. And let me tell you, I'd consider this kind of a more advanced project. I'd probably start out with like a dominant or co-down or something like that and slowly transition maybe into recessives, and then I'd say this is even more advanced than getting into recessives like albinos or pieds, because it can be pretty confusing, especially producing normal looking snakes and you really don't know the potential as a new breeder. I think it can get a little bit maddening. And there's actually some markers that you can actually see on some of these snakes if you're actually comparing just a normal to an asphalt or yellow belly. Usually on the asphalt yellow bellies, you'll actually get some flaming coming up between the alien heads here. As a matter of fact, on this one, there's no flaming at all. Usually it's like a light color coming right up between the alien heads. And usually with the yellow bellies, and asphalts, it can be kind of an orange color, which is kind of interesting. No flaming at all on this one. Sometimes you can actually see a little bit of a light color on the head. On this one, you can't see it at all. And usually the thing that gives it away is if you actually flip over the snake and look at the belly, usually on either side of the belly, it has like a black pixelation, kind of like a granulation. It has some markings on either side of the belly that pretty much give it away. It's either an asphalt or a yellow belly compared to a normal. So if you actually take an asphalt and you breed it to a yellow belly, 25% of the time this is what you get. You get a Freeway, and it's kind of interesting how variable the Freeways can be. I actually looked at all the Freeways over here and I'd say this is probably the average visual appearance of a Freeway. If you're looking for Freeways, I'd say maybe about half of them kind of look like this, and there are extreme examples as far as the visual appearance. And usually on the Freeways you'll have this dotted line right down the top. Sometimes you'll actually have striping like right behind the neck and a little bit on the tail, but on most of the snake you'll have this dotted yellow line, kind of like the dotted line down the middle of a Freeway. I think that's where it gets its name from. It actually has quite a bit of pattern on the sides. In most cases it'll actually have like a bigger pattern right here on the kind of halfway down, and on the bottom a lot of times you'll have this really crazy like pixelation or granulation on the bottom. It makes for a really amazing combination. So take a look at this one. This one is actually another Freeway, the same exact genes with the asphalt and the yellow belly, but look at how dark it is. It's pretty amazing that this one is the same exact snake as the one I showed before. And this one, you can definitely tell it's super dark, almost to the point of wiping out all the pattern. Pretty amazing. I actually pulled up a few more over here. These are kind of crazy. Here is another Freeway, just the same two genes. All these snakes are exactly the same as far as the genetic makeup, and look at the difference. It's pretty amazing. This one has a lot of oranges, and in some of these Freeways you actually have the pattern coming down. It almost looks electric, like static electricity or something coming down on the sides. Kind of crazy. And you'll notice on this one it doesn't have hardly any striping at all. It's pretty much all this dotted pattern all the way down. I actually pulled up a couple more freeways that are really extreme examples. Take a look at this one. This is kind of crazy. This one, I couldn't believe this is just another freeway. This has a line almost completely down the back, and all the sides are completely wiped out. So let me tell you, if you actually jumped into the Freeway project and you bought some random yellow belly and a random asphalt and you bred it together, who knows what you're going to pop out. Sometimes it can be pretty unexpected. So take a look at this. I pulled up one more over here. This is kind of an interesting freeway. Some of them have a lot of orange, and some of them, like in this case, are almost like a green tint, like a brownish green. Really amazing. I kind of like this. I kind of like this green color. It's not very often that you'll actually see green, kind of a brownish green in ball pythons. It almost looks like some kind of a fabric or something. And this one is kind of interesting. It kind of has lines and then these little dashes, and more kind of half and half through the whole thing. It's pretty amazing. So this is where things can get even more interesting if you actually mix in pastel with the Freeway. The pastel is really extremely variable. This is what one version of the pastel looks like, and I'd say this is probably the brightest pastel I've ever seen. This one is super bright. Sometimes it can be really bright, and sometimes the pastels can be really browned out. It's pretty amazing. And sometimes the patterns can be almost like a normal looking snake with the little alien heads, and sometimes with the pastels it can be really jumbled up. So here's what happens in one case if you actually take the pastel and work it into the Freeway. Take a look at this crazy snake. I don't know what happens when you work the pastel into the Freeway, but you get some of the craziest looking snakes. I can't even wrap my mind around how these genes are interacting together. It just kind of blows my mind. And this one actually, this is one of the newer ones that popped up. I've never seen anything so impressive as this pastel Freeway. This is actually a pastel or a super pastel. I've seen kind of pastels and super pastels both look like a high white like this, and usually they don't have really wiped out sides that are really clean like this. This is really amazing. And look at that line right down the top. It almost looks like electric, super bright on a black background. That is crazy. And usually if you work pastel into the Freeways, you actually get a light head. Kind of works the same with the super pastels. I think that's where it's kind of hard to tell the two apart. And this one actually, looking at the price on this one, I couldn't believe this one actually sold for $1,000. If I would have had the money on this one, I would have definitely bought this one. I think kind of the trick to buying into the Freeway project, if you really want to make some really stunning snakes, what I would actually do is I would buy a couple of these that look really impressive and breed them together, and then make some really impressive combinations, because you know what they look like when you actually breed them together. So take a look at this. This is really wild too. This is actually another pastel Freeway, exactly the same as the last snake. And for some reason, I think there's different versions of the pastel that work with the different versions of the yellow belly and the asphalt. All three genes coming together. Sometimes you can have a really white background, really blazing white, and sometimes you can have a lot of yellow, and sometimes it can be kind of in the middle. It's pretty unexpected when you're working with the Freeways. It's kind of crazy. And just look at the pattern on this one, especially that line right down the top. That is crazy. And it seems like all the lines right down the top are really accented from this black background right behind the lines, and most of them have kind of this electric pattern coming right down the side. That is really crazy. So take a look at this one. This one's kind of halfway between the really stark white and the yellow version. Has a little bit of pixelation. You can definitely see between all the pastel Freeways. If you actually take, you know, like a pastel yellow belly and breed it to an asphalt, it's kind of like, who knows what you're gonna get. You can get, you know, it really depends from one to the other. It's pretty unexpected until you actually produce it. Sometimes it's kind of the neat part of the project if you bought a whole bunch of kind of low-end snakes and then you breed them together, because some of these can be really expensive. So the other thing is if you're actually trying to get into this project, most of these are super expensive. I'd say probably $1,000 is the cheapest you're gonna get. This one's actually sold for $1,750. So a lot of times you really can't throw down the money to actually buy the visuals. A lot of times you have to buy, you know, either the asphalt or yellow belly combinations and kind of mix them together, you know, kind of the single genes, and kind of take a chance. The problem is if you actually buy two snakes that are either asphalt or yellow belly, you're actually taking a chance of getting the super yellow belly, which is an all-white snake, which is kind of a bummer. The all-white snake completely wipes out all the other genes except for maybe leopards. It's pretty much the only thing that'll break through the super yellow belly. And that's kind of the other kind of the challenging thing about this project. If you actually took two Freeways and bred them together, you're going to end up with 25% of the time you'll get an all-white snake, and you won't know what genes are in that all-white snake. As a matter of fact, if you actually, it's an allelic complex, so you'll have super yellow belly, which means you won't have any asphalt in the mix. You can only have two genes of a compatible gene. So it gets a little bit complicated when you're actually getting into the Freeways. This is definitely one of the projects that I want to get to at some point. So take a look at this one. This is kind of interesting. I actually found this over here. This is actually two pastel Freeways, pretty much the same size, side by side, from the same breeder. And what this really tells me right here, what I'm thinking that this tells me, that this looks like these are from the same group of hatchlings. So it seems like, you know, a lot of genes can be what in ball pythons we call polymorphic. So for example, the amount of white on the side of a spider is really polymorphic. So you can actually take a spider, breed it to something else, and you get half spiders. Well, in all those spiders, sometimes you can get a really high white side and sometimes you can get a low white side. And in a whole clutch of spiders, you'll actually see the high whites and the low whites all kind of mixed together. And if you actually take a look at this, it's kind of interesting. It doesn't really seem like it's a polymorphic trait with the, you know, the Freeways. So it seems like you can actually take a Freeway, breed it to another Freeway, and you get a certain look of a Freeway that you would always get breeding those two snakes together. So I don't think it's really the variability within the two parents. I think it's the variability within the different lines of the pastel, the yellow belly, and the asphalt all coming together, which is kind of cool because if you have some really impressive snakes like this, you can actually just keep cranking them out, breeding the same parents together versus, you know, getting really wild, unexpected results from the same clutch of eggs, which is kind of cool. You can actually line breed for the particular visual appearance that you're shooting for. So here is the Enchi. As a matter of fact, if you actually work the Enchi into the Freeway, you get what is known as the Mardi Gras, kind of the nickname for that combination. And the Enchi can be really variable. And talk about variability, I'd say these are probably the most variable genes between the pastel, the Enchi, the yellow belly, and the asphalt. You can get some really different results working with all those genes. And the Enchi, it's kind of interesting. Some of them, this one's almost hard to tell. It's an Enchi. I actually produced one this year, and sometimes they're pretty tough to tell. It reduces the pattern a little bit, and sometimes the Enchis can reduce it down into tiger stripes, which is kind of crazy. You can definitely see in this Enchi, it really brings out a lot more orange, and a lot of Enchis don't bring out as much orange, so it really depends on what you're shooting for as far as the line of Enchi. And it's kind of weird with all these genes, we really don't specify the different lines of like Enchis. Sometimes there's certain lines of pastel or yellow belly that people kind of break away and have their certain name, they kind of name that line, but I'd say in most cases, a lot of people just kind of group them all together as Enchi, and you really never know what you're going to get, especially if you buy a combination that contains Enchi and you kind of breed it out and separate the Enchi. Sometimes it's kind of a surprise as far as what the visual appearance is going to be. So here's what happens if you actually take Enchi and you work it into the Freeway. You get the Mardi Gras, and I absolutely love the Mardi Gras combinations. It completely changes it. It brings in a lot more orange and yellow in a lot of combinations. That's from the Enchi coming through, and the Enchi is known as a pattern reducing gene, and essentially what it does in this one, you almost can't see the Enchi in there. It really reduces it into these little patches throughout the snake, which is kind of an interesting effect, working Enchi into the Freeway. I actually pulled up a couple more over here, some more Mardi Gras, and look at how variable it can be from one to the other. This is actually another Enchi Freeway. They can be so variable. Some of them can be really bright, some of them can be more or high contrast or low contrast. Some of them can have a lot of pattern or no pattern. It's pretty amazing from one to the other how they can really change. I actually pulled one more up over here. Take a look at this. This is another Inchy Freeway, another Mardi Gras. It's pretty amazing. They're almost like snowflakes if you look at all the Freeway combinations. There are no two Freeways the same unless you're really, looking at the Freeways within a certain group of hatchlings. Sometimes you can see some that are pretty close in appearance. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Prepper Girl asks, when you're selling your banana/coral glow hatchlings, can you list them as either gene? And that is a very good question. So when it comes to really similar genes like the banana and the coral glow, there's some people, including myself, that consider them to be pretty much the same gene. They look almost exactly the same when they're hatchlings, and they both go through a big transformation. They kind of turn into like a two-tone yellow full of a whole bunch of freckles. They develop the freckles as they age and mature. Pretty much the only two genes that do that. They're also the only two genes that are sex-linked, meaning if you actually took like a banana male maker and you bred it to something else, all the banana offspring would all be males. Pretty much the only two genes in all of ball pythons that have that weird anomaly. I consider them to be pretty much the same, although there's a lot of people that consider them to be different genes, two different lines of the same gene. As a matter of fact, when I go to the reptile shows and I'm showing off my hatchlings, my coral glow hatchlings, a lot of times they'll look significantly different than a lot of the banana hatchlings. You can definitely see some differences, and I don't know if it's just the variability within the bananas and the coral glows, not necessarily the difference between the two lines of the genes. So it's kind of interesting. I would probably list them. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll actually list them over on Morphmarket as both genes in the search. They'll put both genes in the search. So if you're searching for bananas, the coral glows will come up to try to increase kind of the visibility of their snakes over there. But a lot of times you'll actually click on those ads and you'll go in and you'll actually see that it's listed as a coral glow, but it'll put both the coral glow and the banana genes just for the search. And sometimes it can get a little bit confusing. Say for example, if you took a coral glow and you bred it to a banana and you produce some offspring, in that case you really can't tell the difference between the coral glow and the banana offspring, and a lot of people just list them as a banana/coral glow. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.